Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's Planning Applications Committee meeting, 23rd of May 2023. I'll start off with the Chair's welcome of the evacuation procedure. I know there's a lot of new people in here, so this is mainly for your benefit. Can I please ask that you to ensure that you are all signed into the signing sheet provided, that these will be used in case of an evacuation. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Lloyds Bank building on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded for future publication on the Council's website. Please can I ask you to turn off your mobile phone or to at least ensure that it's turned to silent for the duration of the meeting. Item 2, apologies. I have 2 apologies from Councillors Greens and Councillor Shires. Item 3, the minutes from the previous meeting on the 9th of May. Can I just check with members, are you happy for me to sign those off as a true and accurate representation of the meeting? I'm seeing no dissent, so I shall sign that now. I'll just leave that there. Thank you. Item number 4, declarations of interest. So are there any members with any declarations of interest which are not printed as per the schedule? No. Item number 5, sir. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I ought to declare a bit of an interest in terms of the applicant. She's actually an accountant, and the company she works for prepare the accounts for a charity that I'm chair of. I don't have a personal relationship there. I only see her once a year to sign off the accounts, but I thought it best to declare that. I haven't discussed the application with her whatsoever. In fact, I haven't seen her since last year. So.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. Item number 5, declarations of contact. I have to make a declaration at this point. I have been dealing with MFS fencing myself in my role as ward councillor for about an 18-month period from when I was first elected, and I have been sort of working through with various enforcement issues that have arisen. So I will not be able to carry on chairing this meeting. So once we start the item, I will step down, and Councillor Shepherd as vice chair will then assume the mantle of chair. Okay, however, I will be speaking on this matter as ward councillor. Councillor Smith.
Yes, as the other ward councillor, I don't have the relationship you've had with the tenants. However, I did visit the site yesterday just to have a look for myself and had a conversation with them, but I haven't given them any indication how I might vote. So.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. So that brings us on then to our first and only item this evening. So at this point, I'm going to now vacate the seat and hand over to Councillor Shepherd. Once I finish speaking, I will, as per standard procedure, vacate the chamber.
So thank you. So if we can move on then to the planning application, which is Western Hall Farm. Over to yourself, Phil.
Okay then. Thank you, Chair. This is item 1, reference number 038858, Western Hall Farm, 195 Nuneaton Road. The application is for retrospective consent for the change of use of existing agricultural building and associated yard to use Class E, G, III for use as a timber fencing manufacturer and contractor / storage yard. As it's the main part of the application description, on screen is the definition of use class EG III, which allows for any industrial process being a use which can be carried out in any residential area without detriment to the amenity of that area by reason of noise, vibration, smell, fumes, smoke, soot, ash, dust, or grit. In essence, this means that it is a light industrial use, such as manufacturing and engineering, is a residential area that does not detrimentally impact the amenities of the area. There is not a definitive example list that we can provide. It's all about fact and degree and the scale of the use. As you can see from the agenda report, there are six main issues to consider for this application. These are the principle of the residential development, the impact on residential amenity, the impact on visual amenity, the impact on highway safety, the impact on the Greenbelt, and the impact on heritage and listed buildings. The first issue to consider is the principle of development. The development fails to comply with policies DS3 and DS7 of the Borough Plan and the relevant policies contained within the MPPF. This is because the development is not within the settlement boundary of Bulkington, and new proposals under the policy of DS3 are limited to agriculture, forestry, leisure, and other uses that can be demonstrated to require a location outside of the settlement boundary. The image on screen shows where the settlement the boundary is, and everything below the line is within Bulkington, and everything above it, including the applicant site, is not within the settlement boundary. The proposed access to the site is on the settlement boundary, but not within the settlement of Bulkington. The list of uses for outside of a settlement boundary does not include the proposed use class e.g. III, and thus is unacceptable. Furthermore, the site is located within the Greenbelt, and this has to be in line with the national policies within the MPPF and policy DS7 of the Borough Plan. But this will be dealt with in more detail on the impact within the Greenbelt section of both the report and this presentation. Overall, the principal development is not acceptable as it fails to comply with both MPPF and Borough Plan policies. The next issue to assess is the impact on residential amenity. NBBC Environmental Health were consulted and submitted a neutral response as concerns were raised about noise, but subject to the manufacturing operations being limited, and if approved, conditioned to stay within the building, it would be able to alleviate the concerns raised. Noise and disturbance are associated with the previous agricultural use, even though it's not confirmed, and so it is expected that a level of noise is going to occur. Therefore, on balance, it is considered that the industrial use could be carried out within this residential area without detriment to the residential amenity of the area in terms of noise, vibration, smell, fumes, smoke, soot, ash, dirt, or grit. Next, the impact on visual amenity was assessed. However, as a proposal, it does not erect or propose any new buildings or further development. It is not considered that the change of use would have a detrimental impact on the visual amenities of the area beyond the previous use of the site. The next issue to consider is the impact on highway safety. Warwick County Council Highways were consulted on the application, and after much discussion, most of which is outlined in detail in section 4 of the appraisal section of the agenda report, returned a response that the application does not adequately demonstrate that the intensification of the access would not result in severe impact on the road network, and it has not been adequately demonstrated that there is space for two-way movement within 20 metres of the access from Nuneaton Road, nor any passing points on the access road which would result in an acceptable impact on highway safety. This means that the applicant has not provided the Highway Authority with enough information for them to assess this proposal as acceptable, and therefore the application will be, and therefore this will be one of the reasons that the application will be refused. The next impact is the impact on the Greenbelt. On screen is a map generated for this presentation showing the Greenbelt with its boundary and how the site and the site access relate to the Greenbelt. As you can see, it is located within the Greenbelt, and this is where we have to assess the impact on the Greenbelt. The applicant site is located well within the Greenbelt, with the access to the site on the Greenbelt boundary. The MPPF sets out the 5 purposes of the Greenbelt, which are listed in the agenda report, and states what development is not inappropriate to the Greenbelt, provided they preserve the openness and do not conflict with the purposes of the land within. These are also listed within the relevant section of the agenda report. In this case, it is felt that although the reuse of the agricultural building would be considered as a form of appropriate development, the intended use of the land is not acceptable under the development paragraph in the MPPF. It has also not been adequately demonstrated that this location is required for this use compared to other non-Greenbelt sites, either in this borough or neighbouring boroughs. Therefore, it has been concluded, after assessing the proposal against the Greenbelt policies, it would represent inappropriate development within the Greenbelt, which by definition is harmful to Greenbelt and such is stated as a reason for refusal. The final issue to consider is the potential impact on heritage and listed buildings. Western Hill Farmhouse, 195 Nuneaton Road, is a Grade 2 listed buildings. The details and reasons for the listing are detailed in the report. In turn, for this application, the curtilage of the listed building does not adjoin the site, and in any case, the proposed site and this property are separated by another building, which means that it can be concluded that there is no material harm to the listed building, and so the impact is acceptable. There are no addendum items for this application, for this present agenda item. Therefore, the recommendation is to refuse planning permission for the reasons printed in the agenda report. Thanks, Chair.
I have 4 speakers on this item. The first speaker being Councillor Lubs-Chekovic. You've got 3 minutes.
Chair, members of the Planning Application Committee. It's always a way. Chair, members of the Planning Application Committee, I'm speaking in my role as Ward Councillor for Bulkington. I've been supporting Mr and Mrs Upperdine since being first elected with this particular issue, so some sort of 3 years now. Mr and Mrs Upperdine set up their business several years ago and have provided valuable employment opportunities within the village, employing 7 to 10 people, many of who you can see sat in the public gallery right now. As you will have seen and heard, the land is classed as Greenbelt. However, the ground which they are currently operating on has not been altered or changed by them. The roadway and the hard standing of the farm outbuildings were all there when they took over. The only addition is a small office building which can be easily moved and is a temporary structure. I've been led to believe that all the objections have come from only 2 addresses, so that's 5 objections, while in support you have 9 statements of support from 9 separate individuals, showing that there is far more positive impact on this business than outweighs any potential issues. The area was also tidied up by Mr and Mrs Upperdine when they moved onto the site, getting rid of I believe old caravans and defunct bits of machinery. They have been making fence panels and fence posts for just over 3 years. In a typical day, they have between 5 and 7 vehicle movements, which are mainly cars and transit-sized vans. They do not have a regular supply of articulated lorries, as suggested within the report. Warwickshire County Council talks about the road issues, but provided no figures and have used TRIX data, which we saw last time when we discussed the Crow Hill item, and we know how out of date that data is, and we know that it's also flawed. They talk about the road junction being dangerous, yet in the 3 years that the Upperdines have been trading, not a single road traffic accident has taken place in that area. Warwickshire County Council also mentioned the state of the roads. This can't be fully attributed to the business, as the farm shop that is located there also track far more vehicle movements each and every day, including heavy articulated vehicles. However, part of the failings of the road are to do with the fact that Warwickshire County Council have not resurfaced the roads in many years. This business meets the principles of development as laid out in the MPPF, as well as Planning Policy DS3. The report states, and I'm taking from your report, although the change of use has already occurred and is occupied, this application is considering the principle of the use of the site, and therefore, although the site is currently occupied by a timber fence manufacturing company, several other industrial uses could be carried out on this site under the same use class if planning permission is granted. The work, and I'll talk now in my own words, the work being done is almost identical to forestry and then what a forestry company do. The only difference is they aren't cutting down the trees, but as a forestry company would process the trees, that's essentially what they're doing. They're making fence panels, so they're processing wood. I would therefore suggest that the Planning Application Committee allows permission to be granted, but that it is conditional to limit the type of activities allowed, and if in doubt, provide an extension under which the business operates, at the end of which a full and proper review should be undertaken. I would also encourage members to perform a site visit to assess and see the site for themselves. I am confident this will leave members of the Planning Application Committee in no doubt as to what an asset to the community and the suitability of the land for the company is and how little negative impact it has. Thank you.
Thank you. I did allow you to go slightly over. I am going, is there any, before you leave, is there any member that wishes to seek any clarification from anything that was said? No? Thank you. Moving on to the next speaker, which is Mr. Farndon. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Farndon. I've just done this, it's been done.
I'll do. Having read the reports and listened to the previous speaker, I would actually like to make 3 or 4 points regarding the safety. First of all, articulated lorries do make deliveries to the fencing contractor, and I'm sure they can, if they're honest, will be able to confirm that. Secondly, over the past 2 months, I personally have seen 2 fixed-bodied long-wheel lorries reversing from the site onto Nuneaton Road, having made deliveries, which I feel is seriously dangerous. There are also obviously issues regarding the use. I gather Councillor Smith went yesterday. I presume that he saw large quantities of concrete road barriers now being stored in other areas that were delivered last week. They also run a plant hire business from this yard. Finally, as I say, Councillor Smith went yesterday. If he witnessed any of the white van drivers or pickup lorries collecting materials, they do not respect the 5 mile an hour speed limit, although it's a public footpath or bridle path. And the dust they created yesterday and today is huge, clouds of dust. Nothing has been done to deal with that. And finally, as has been said about the safety issues, no work has been done, or I understand has been accepted by Highways for the improvement of the junction. The owner of the fencing company only last week had to take evasive action because a lorry was coming down and swung into our driveway. As I say, it is mainly a safety issue. And I can actually demonstrate that these facts are correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Has any member got any points of clarification for Mr. Farndon? Councillor Hammersley.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. Is the drive a dirt drive or is it a tarmac drive?
It's a dirt drive, and at the entrance to the road, the curb entrance has already been severely damaged by the vehicles.
Thank you. Moving on to our next speaker, which is James Biggs, who is the applicant. Have 3 minutes.
My parents are the owners of Western Hill Farm, Bulkington, and I would like to explain why I am in favour of the planning application. The proposed change of use provides for agricultural diversification, which is supported by government policy. The yard has always been used and continues to be used by the farm for storage of wooden potato boxes, silage bales, plant and machinery, etc. So the storage of fencing materials has no greater impact on the openness of the Greenbelt than agricultural use. The yard is surrounded by existing farm buildings which have been upgraded over the years as the farm has evolved. The Arctic lorries are predominantly for farm deliveries of fertiliser and collections of grain, etc. All vehicles that come down the farm drive have adequate room to turn round and leave the site in a forward direction. We have tried to work with the local authority to improve the access, but the Highways Authority appear to be demanding a full-blown access arrangement akin to an industrial site, which we feel is heavily disproportionate to the scale of the development proposed and would be out of keeping with the surrounding rural environment. There have been no accidents attributable to the access. We do not want to convert the farm into an industrial park. The main focus of the farm is to continue as a working farm for future generations and supply local produce to the local community. In addition to all of this, the fencing business creates local employment, local rural enterprise, which is again supported by government policy. Having additional people on the farm also helps with both security and provides additional help when lone working is an issue. We believe this proposal is a low-key issue. There is no greater impact and gives diversification to our business. I would also like to point out that the concrete blocks were delivered last week to the farm are relating to the farm. We are happy to invite you for a site visit if you feel this is necessary. Given these circumstances, we respectfully request the committee grant permission for this application. Thank you.
Has any member got any points of clarification with Mrs. Biggs? No? Okay, then move on to our next speaker, which is Lindsay Upton.
MFS are a small family-run business that has been established for over 20 years, serving local businesses, public, also working closely with schools, nurseries, charities and the diocese. Our move to Western Hill Farm was a mutual agreement by the farm and ourselves in March 2020 to help our business and provide diversity and additional security to this working farm and its residents. At no point has our business intervened or taken agricultural space away from the farm. We only occupy one small section of a barn and share an existing yard on brown belt land used for storage of agricultural machinery. Our business creates no pollution, noise disturbance, bad odours, or has any detrimental effects on the residential area, and the majority of our products are from natural sources. Residents in the immediate vicinity fully support our business. As you can see from the collected evidence, we have several letters of support and very few objections. The objection from Highways is the main point to address here and relates primarily to the farm's entrance and volume of transport. I would like to ask how the data relating to the vehicles is being collected. A referral was made that during a 16-hour day, a total of 47 vehicles, 9 of which were HGVs, entered the site. This information is inaccurate for the following reasons. We only operate a 9-hour day. Most of our deliveries operate in smaller 7.5 or 3.5 tonne vehicles with a need for a larger HGV 2 to 3 times per month maximum. The farm itself, which also sells potatoes, eggs and calagas, has far more larger vehicles delivering to site and greater footfall, and their vehicle data should not be considered in connection to our business. We only have 2 of our own standard transit vans which generally leave in the morning and return at night. In addition, all our local contractors come in standard transit vans or smaller, up to a maximum of 6 vehicles per day. In relation to vehicles visiting our site reversing up the driveway, this only applied to one delivery from one company who were unaware of the manoeuvrability at the top of the driveway. This company has since been notified and the issue has been rectified. In relation to the driveway itself, although not our responsibility, we maintain this by constantly filling the potholes and have paid for unfitted speed limit signs. To summarise, our business is small scale. The space we occupy on the farm is minimal and situated away from the main farming area within an existing yard. We employ a good team of local people, all of which are families to support. We encourage use of effective recycling and use of sustainable products. We have been caught in the crossfire of a family feud on the farm that has directly affected us as individuals and as a business, and feel some of the information put forward is incorrect and misleading. We have asked on several occasions for a site visit and feel this is the only fair way of establishing and collecting the correct data and checking on the operations of our business. At the end of the day, we've become a valuable part of this community. Through a challenging and uncertain pandemic period, we were supported by way of a small grant from the council, so now feel frustrated that we're being presented with a situation that could have such a detrimental effect on our business and its employees. We'd welcome anybody to visit our business.
Has any member got any points of clarification? The speaker? No? Unfortunately, you can't. So to allow for debate, to move the recommendation to refuse planning permission for the reasons as printed, could I have, to move into debate, can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Only to enable debate.
Councillor Wilson and Councillor Hartshorn as the seconder. Thank you. So I'm going to move into debate. So any member. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. This is a slightly perplexing case, I must be honest. And I suspect it is a finely balanced case from officers, certainly in relation to the Greenbelt. When I look at page 24 of the agenda, where it goes on about the impact on the Greenbelt, at the very bottom it provides some exceptions where it says it would not be inappropriate in the Greenbelt, provided that they preserve openness and do not conflict with the purposes of the land within. If I look at those six that there are there, D seems to strike me as being applicable to this case, Chair, that it is the reuse of buildings provided that the buildings are of permanent and substantial construction. I think we could all agree that with this being a listed building and being a long-standing agricultural usage, that it must be permanent and it is a substantial construction. So, on balance, I don't feel it would be inappropriate impact on the Greenbelt. This isn't like we are building 450 houses on the Greenbelt, Chair. This is an existing building on agricultural usage, and it's just a slightly different use for that part of the building. And it's also worth noting, in any event, although I know it's now been removed from Greenbelt, there are proposals within the existing Borkington area, not too distant from this place, which would actually be building on what was considered to be Greenbelt only 4 years ago. The issue for me is about the highway safety. Many of us have served on this committee a long time, Chair, and to actually get an objection from highways may seem to those of us who serve our local communities almost be as rare as finding hen's teeth in some cases. And we are begging for highways to object to some things, but we don't get that. I think this is actually, in my experience, one of the longest objections from highways printed in an agenda from memory. But my issue with it is this, and I think the applicants do have a point here, that they are being judged on a more industrial, full-scale use of the land. This is a relatively small area of the property, and if I'm being honest, if the farm itself, without having a change of use, was more intensively used on the farming element, or if the shop was more well used, not that it isn't well used, but it could be more used if that was to be the case, you would have that many vehicles going in and out of the property anyway, potentially, without a change of use. And there would be nothing that highways, theoretically, or us as a planning authority could do, because it is its existing agricultural usage. You could have, if it was more intensively used, or they had other different agricultural purposes, more vehicles going in and out. So I don't necessarily see that being an obstacle on the highway, which is slightly perplexing given some of the challenge that we've had recently with highways. So I can understand why highways are saying it, but on balance, I can't agree based on its existing usage that it has permission for. It is no better or any worse than the worst case scenario that could happen already. So I find myself actually going against the highways issue. That then leads me to, if the committee is minded to approve, what conditions would be attached to the usage? And that is something that I think we need to be very mindful of if we are to actually go against this recommendation and possibly move a recommendation of approval. Because before I approve it, if I was minded to do that and the committee was minded to do that, I would also want to know what conditions are on there to know that there are adequate safeguards in place. And I know this predates our new assistant director's time in position, but when we have been in these unusual circumstances, I have said that if there seems to be a chance that we could go against officer recommendation to refuse and actually approve, it might be useful to actually have printed with the agenda what they would consider to be appropriate conditions, because unless Maria can actually give us what she would consider to be appropriate tonight, that might be putting her on the spot slightly too much. So on balance, I think I'm going to vote against the recommendation, but I'm also intrigued as to what conditions might be in place if we were to approve, Chair. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Maria.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, you're right. If you were minded to approve, we would need to look very carefully at conditions. Now, obviously, we're in the situation at the moment that if you haven't seen sight to those conditions. So there is probably two options open to you. The first option being potentially the giving myself delegated authority to work with the ward members to look at appropriate conditions. And I think given what we've got from highways, we would need to have some conversations with highways. I mean, just to make it clear that this isn't necessarily a complete objection from highways. They're basically just saying that they haven't got enough information to make a positive recommendation on this one. So I think we would need to be looking at a highways condition of some sort. And then obviously the other one is to defer and officers to come back with more information where members might want to look at the conditions actually at a planning applications committee meeting. So those really are the two options that are open to you if you were to go down that route.
Thank you, Maria. Is there any other members who wish to speak? I've got Councillor Hammersley, Councillor Cape and Councillor Smith. So, Councillor Hammersley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There does seem some anomalies here, whether there's... and I have to be on the fence for both sides. With Arctics are used or not used, and if they are used, if it's for the farm only, are these people getting blamed because they're saying they're going? There's a grey area there whether Arctics, I'm not disputing if they are, if they're not. If they are they going to the farm where it doesn't come into? So that one, it sort of puts me on the fence a little bit. And again, the conditions which mentioned with a lorry reversing down the drive. Now, I'm not sure, and again, it could be under conditions if we go that way. There are people called banksmen. Now, if anybody knows about driving or yards, banksmen can be used if vehicles can only go in forwards and come out rearwards. So when they're reversing onto a highway, they can stop the traffic and get the lorry out and on its way. But it has been said that lorries can turn round in the yard. So can they, can't they? Again, it's a grey area for me. And the information where it said not enough information for the highways, I'm not sure who needs to supply whatever information that highways require. is it from the applicant, or I'm not sure who needs to supply that. And if there's any reason why it hasn't been supplied, again, a grey area, I'm not sure on that one either. So it's a difficult one for me. It's jobs in the area, etc., and things, conditions, I do understand and respect the local person. That's why I asked if it's a dusty road, or if a dirt road, or if it's tarmac. It's a dusty road. But it's always been a dusty road with farm tractors up and down with trailers, etc., etc. So that is not a recent problem. That problem has already been there without the fencing company being there. So, yes, it's not nice for dust, but it's not. It appears to me not to be a recent problem. It has always been there. So I am on the fence with this. I would like to think that jobs are being brought in the area. So, like with Councillor Wilson, I would like this looked into further. Thank you, Chair.
Is there anything you need to come back on, Philip? In terms of what members...
Just on the one point, you would now look that they would have to show that they could come out forward facing. Even with banksmen, we wouldn't look at reversing. So again, that would be part of any further discussion you may want through a deferral or through conditions. We often condition that things have to come out forward facing onto main roads now.
I'm sorry, Mr. Biggs, unfortunately you can't come back at this stage.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Wilson actually ticked all the things I've got on my list to talk about. So, policy is a difficult one. We always try and follow policy where we can, but I think we have to apply them reasonably and fairly. And in terms of openness in the Greenbelt, yes, it is in the Greenbelt, but it's an enclosed yard that's traditionally been used for farm equipment, and I don't see that storing of wood and building of fencing in there really, you know, I can't see how that doesn't fit in a rural setting. From what I saw on my visit yesterday, traffic levels to this particular business seem very, very low, and mainly small vans. I'm told by the tenants that they do have articulated vehicles visiting, but probably one a week, possibly one every 2 weeks. I can't validate that, but that's what I'm told. From what I can see, there's probably more traffic caused by the farm than there is by this tenant business. From what I saw, there's no reason for vehicles to actually reverse out the drive. There is a turning point at the bottom of the drive, and there is actually a gate into a field that they can open for larger vehicles to reverse into and come out frontward. So there is absolutely no reason why anything should come out of there reversing onto the road. I think pretty much I haven't got a lot else to add that hasn't already been said, other than I do believe conditions should apply. I'm a bit disappointed with the applicants, to be honest, because I think if they'd have provided a little bit more information to highways, we could have overcome the highways objection. And I think there is something about widening the bell mouth to make access easier. So I don't know if we can condition that or have a conversation with highways about what they would recommend condition-wise were we to go against the recommendation and approve it. But I think those conditions, rather than drag this out and defer it and have it come back to committee, I think we should give delegated authority to our Assistant Director of Planning to actually work out those conditions, talk to highways, and then apply them.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Kemp.
Not wishing to repeat everything that my colleagues have said, I was perturbed for the same reasons. On one hand, all of the highways objections are hypotheticals. On page 22, the top paragraph about the presence of potholes, perhaps they should visit the rest of Nuneaton. The extra time it takes can, maybe, possibly. Further down that page, it says that an articulated lorry was observed, but they don't actually state whether or not it actually accessed the site or whether it was farm traffic. So there is a lot of inconsistency in what highways are saying, because they're saying that they were informed that a vehicle attended. They actually don't have, in my experience in the past, I've had to provide video footage of nuisance lorries to prove where they were coming from. In this case, it says they were informed. I'm not calling the informants or saying they're misleading, but there actually seems to be a lack of hard data to say that it will cause a highway issue. Having said that, I agree with my colleagues that should people be minded to grant permission, then it should be heavily conditioned. Notice I said should and could as well.
Councillor Markham.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the highways, if Arctics are actually being used for the farm, I don't see what the difference is if they're being used for this business. How can they say it's okay for one and not for the other? So that was the one on the Arctics using it. I don't know how many use it for each, but they're obviously being used for both. I also agree with Councillor Wilson that the impact on the Greenbelt is negligible, really, because the building's already there. It's not something that's been built, it's just being changed, the use has been changed, nothing's been added to it. And again, with everybody else, I think if it is allowed to go ahead, that it does need conditions on it. Thank you.
Chair. Yeah, if I could just come back. Ooh, sorry. In terms of the building itself, you've looked at the policy, and quite rightly some of you have said, you know, the building itself, it is an existing building, so that doesn't go against policy. It is the activity outside, and just to obviously make sure that when you're making your decision, you're happy that there is not the impact on the openness and function of the Greenbelt. So the building we're fine with in terms of policy. It's just when you make your decision, we just need to be clear that there is no adverse impact on that openness and function of the Greenbelt.
I haven't got any other member wishing to speak, so I'm going to move to the recommendation, and the recommendation is to refuse planning permission for the reasons as printed. All those in favour of that recommendation, please show. Just be me. Against? No abstentions. So, as you've refused that recommendation, can I then ask if somebody is going to move an alternative recommendation? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I would move approval. We also need to give reasons for approval, don't we, on the ground, because we're going against the officer recommendation. So I would move that on the grounds that we don't believe it is an adverse impact on the Greenbelt or would impact on the openness of the surrounding Greenbelt, and that ground D applies for the reuse of buildings, etc., and that the highways would be no better or worse than the existing use class already identified for the whole of the land there. I would move approval on with those reasons, and delegate authority to the Assistant Director for Planning in consultation with the local ward members to come up with appropriate approval conditions. I'm sure that they are experienced enough to be able to do that, Chair.
Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Smith and Councillor Cave. Maria, are you happy with that recommendation? So I will move to the recommendation that approval be given. I don't know whether you want to say it all again, Councillor Wilson, because I can't remember, unfortunately.
I shall trust that members were being diligent in listening.
Yes, thank you. So I will move that we grant planning approval with the delegated authority going across to the officer in terms of the conditions and how, yes, in consultation with the ward councillors, and can I also ask that the chair's included in that, obviously. So if we move that recommendation, all those in favour, please show. Against? That's carried. Oh. And I have no other business in the meeting, so if I can thank you all for your time and wish you a safe journey home.